Welcome to the Women's March Canada podcast, making the equality of women in Canada the new norm. This is episode 2, and it's titled, Don't Call Bill 62 Feminism. I'm Melissa Durrell, and I'm your host, inspiring, uniting, and leading the charge for the advancement of women across our country. Bill 62. It was voted in last week, and I'm just going to invite our guest here, take her off hold. Hello, Farheen. I'm just going to introduce our subject really quickly. Bill 62 was voted into law last week in Quebec. It bans the wearing of facial coverings for anyone giving or receiving public service. That's hospitals, that's libraries, that's public transportation. We're going to dig into all of that. The question is this a feminist issue? Is it a women's issue? Many Muslim women have been very vocal that they feel singled out. And as I mentioned, Farheen Khan is joining us. Farheen Khan is the Director, Fund Development and External Affairs at the International Development and Relief Foundation. We're really happy to have you here. She's worked with the United Way as well. Her background is corporate, but she shifted her focus to social justice after Islamophobia started to become more prominent after 9/11. Farheen is the author of 2 books that focus on gender-based Islamophobia, abuse, healing, and self-love. Farheen is the editor-in-chief of the #muslimsactually blog and campaign, where she's committed to creating positive images of Muslims in society in order to challenge the stereotypes being perpetuated by the media. And boy, we've had a lot of that over the last 10 days, haven't we, Farheen?
Absolutely.
Yes. So let's start quickly with, what was your initial reaction to Bill 62?
Well, it was certainly, quite alarming and upsetting. It's something that, over time, Quebec has tried to introduce a number of times, and a number of us have advocated against it. Particularly after Quebec City and the fact that it's not even been a year since the mosque attack, it's very concerning to see this type of legislation come through.
So for those listening right now, let's unpack a little bit about Niqab and a burqa, facial coverings. Let's give a little bit of an education on what each are and why you feel as a Muslim woman that it's part of your culture and religion to wear these.
You're saying, I'm not wearing it. I certainly wear the hijab, which is the head covering. But there are women who cover their face fully, which is would be considered the face veil, which is the niqab. And then there's the burqa, which is sort of the overthrow, sort of the entire covering of the entire body plus the face. So in terms of why one would wear it, I certainly think, different people would interpret religion differently, right? So I'm not a religious scholar. I don't want to really get into sort of the requirements around that. What I would say to you is that everybody's, my personal perspective is I choose to wear the hijab because it's a personal choice. And often women will choose to wear that depending on their level of religiosity, or if they feel that that's a greater connection for them to their believer, to their creator. And so that's something I think that's more individual than anything else. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing to remember here is that, when we're talking about any, item of clothing, like nobody should be dictating what a woman should or should not wear, period. So I don't really think it's really about whether or not it's a religious requirement.
So that's really interesting to me, because as I was preparing, and obviously the last 10 days, there's been a lot of talk on radio talk shows, newspapers, television, and many people are discussing this. And the one comment that always sparks up is about religious, and it's about choice. Mm-hmm. And I think what I would be curious to hear you unpack is this idea of do Muslim women feel like it is their choice to wear that clothing, or is there something else happening? And I think that that's a really important part of what Canadian women need to understand about this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, for myself, for example, I wear it by choice. I think the reasons that I started to wear it when I was younger were very different. It was more religion focused, whereas after 9/11, having experienced an attack myself and sort of seeing the backlash, I really had to make a conscious decision as to whether I would continue to wear it, despite knowing that there might be some safety risk for myself on a personal level. But, you know, the reality is that there are a number of women who do actually choose to wear it, particularly in the West, you know, because they want to, because they believe it's part of their identity. I mean, you know, this way we're able to also educate people. People understand that, you know, we're just normal human beings like everybody else. We are making an effort to, you know, to some of us do that. We actually want to be visible in that way. But like any other, you know, situation, there could be women that are being, you know, asked to wear it. That's no different than any other community or culture where women are, you know, are being are having to deal with people, in particular men, who are, you know, dictating what they should wear, where they should go, that type of thing.
Yeah, it was one of the Andre Lamoureux, who's a political activist. I'm sure you know his stuff for secularism in Quebec. Mm-hmm. And what he said, one of the things he said was the niqab is not a religious sign. It's a political symbol of the enslavement and the de-empowerment of women that's supported by the most repressive regimes on the planet. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, as I've said, like, it's just not, this whole debate of whether or not women should or should not wear the niqab is not really what I'm interested in, right? Like, I think, you know, to me, this is not about whether or what, you know, it's not a religious issue. This is a women's issue. This is an issue of the government dictating, you know, what a woman should or should not wear, period. So, you know, if this is a women's issue, then it's like, you know, today it's the niqab, tomorrow it might be, I don't know, like something completely different, right? Like, why go down that path where women are being subjected to these types of legislations?
Yeah, and it's all about choice. And, you know, I was discussing this with a friend of mine, and they're saying, you know, some feminists might believe that wearing a bra is actually not a choice. You know, like you could take it to so many different, you know, right? Like you don't technically have to wear one. But anyway, we can get into that another time. Okay, so here we are today. It's almost 10 days later. Talk to me about. I mean, obviously, you've been interviewed by many people. What to you is the most important message that you get across to people at this time?
In terms of like the legislation itself, or the concerns?
Yeah, like what I mean, you know, the legislation has been voted on, and you know, it was voted on democratically, 66 to 51. So, and as you said, I mean, it's come up several times, but it's never been voted into law before. So now it has, and you know, and so those choices have been taken away. So what do you do?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, there's two pieces to this. One is that, you know, if this is about religious, you know, people keep saying religious, you know, neutrality, and this is an effort to make, you know, a more harmonious society in Quebec, that's certainly not helpful. This particular legislation is not going to do that. You know, in fact, when we're talking about women who are being denied service, or, you know, being unable to actually now work for government, you know, agencies and stuff like that, then you're basically telling people, in essence, that you don't matter, you don't belong, and that we really don't care about you. So you're actually marginalizing people further away from integrating into society.
Which is one of the most misleading things ever, isn't it?
Yeah, and then two, you're basically limiting people's economic opportunities as well. You're preventing them from engaging in society. You know, like, what happens to the future of these children? You know, that community, right? The Muslim community. How do those children then, you know, grow up in a society where they're actually being othered so much and marginalized in that way? Like, there's so many problems to having something like this in place.
Yeah, I was really taken aback by the Justice Minister, Stephanie Vallee's position. She says this law is not repressive, but then when a reporter asked her about the penalties that might face those who get on a city bus with a covered face, she replied, if they don't get on, you won't get kicked off, which to me was so how are people supposed to get around public transportation? The first word is public, and we're now denying that right to so many people. Like, to me, it's like we're having two completely different conversations in this country. And, you know, when people go to their corners, it's really impossible to collaborate. So how do we get people to come out of their corners to start to have this important conversation?
Well, I mean, I think it's, you know, now we're talking about people's basic rights, right, to access. I mean, Can you imagine not being, able to? So, I know that the minister has been clear about some of the, she gave specific examples over the last couple of days about like what you can do versus what you can't do, and it doesn't make sense, right? So technically, you can go into a hospital, but if you want to access, a staff member, or you're dealing with, if you actually need to have service to be, participate and to access service, in the hospital, then you can't do that unless you show your face, right? You can go into a library with your face covered, but then if you want to borrow a book, then you have to show your face, right? So this is the type of, it's just, it's very hypocritical because, on one hand, you're saying, okay, fine, do you want to come in? You're fine to come in, but then you really can't utilize any service. So, being able to say something like, well, if you don't get on the bus and you're not going to be kicked off, like, what does that mean? That you want people to just sit in their homes and actually not engage at all, which completely defeats the purpose of this quote notion of, we're trying to build a more harmonious society.
Thank you. I kind of lost you there technically, but but you had a good answer, I'm sure. We have some construction outside my building and my Wi-Fi just came in and came out, but we're going to continue on then. I know you ran federally, and a big part of this for me is that when laws are being made by people that don't understand religion and cultures, it's really hard to legislate that, right? Like, so, do you feel that the proper due diligence was done with the Muslim community going into this bill? I mean, I can answer that question myself, but
not that I know, not that I'm aware.
And how do we, yeah. And so how do we fix that? Like, you ran before, are you going to run again? Is this the kind of thing that you think we need to have? Obviously we need to have more women and more Muslim women representing us nationally. Is this the issue that pushes you to the next election?
Well, I mean, certainly that was the issue that brought me into the 2015 election. I mean, that plus the fact that, our then Prime Minister was being very anti-Muslim in general. And having been through so much myself personally, and just knowing the experiences of many women that have had to deal with, personal attacks, be it physical, sexual, or otherwise, verbal, it was really important for us to have somebody up there that was, able to be a representative, so to speak. I mean, I was there, I ran for the NDP. And I was standing, up there on national television with Thomas Mulcair. And so being able to actually be seen up there on national television, I think was very important. It was also great for me to actually go to the doors. I knocked on 10,000 doors, had a chance to meet a number of people. And really and truly, it was all about challenging stereotypes, right? People got a chance to see me. You could see the wheels start to turn in their minds and be like, oh, she understands English. Oh, she knows what she's talking about, right? Like, all of that type of stuff. So, I mean, it certainly was not an easy process. I mean, same with the media. A lot of them, would come to the doors with me, hoping that there'd be a negative reaction that would come out from people who met me at the doors. But in fact, that was not the case. It was very positive, and then the story wouldn't air, right? So, I did my best to make sure that I didn't feed into that narrative of, all Canadians hate Muslims, because that is not the actual truth. But I think it is important for other women to continue to run, and if this type of sentiment continues, then I may have to think about it again as well.
The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has spoken against face covering bans in the past. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that he's an ally to the Muslim community?
I mean, I think he's done his part. I mean, certainly after Quebec City, in the context of Quebec, he was there. He showed his solidarity. He has previously spoken out about it as well. On a federal level, he's been very clear that this is not acceptable. And I think that, we have to trust. I mean, certainly our current government is far better in many ways, than the previous. So I'm happy with that. I mean, like, any other government, there's a lot more that can be done. I mean, things like Bill C-51 still exist, which we know will target, marginalized communities and also the Muslim community. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but the fact that, they have shown some solidarity is important.
I really appreciate you coming on. What I'm curious about is, you have been speaking to people about this the last little while. What's the message you want to get out to people clearly, especially to our listeners of our podcast? What do you think is one of the most important messages you can say?
Well, I think it's just to remember, I mean, especially right now for the women on this show, we're seeing a lot of these hashtags Me Too come out, right? And a lot of us can connect. I mean, we identify as survivors, many of us, because of the experiences we've lived. I don't think this is this is not without discounting. I think it's also important to remember that when women are also, whether it be the women who wear the hijab or the ones who are wearing a niqab, when we're attacked, it's often in sexual in nature. So I just don't want us to, I really think we need to remember that when we're also, looking at this issue, to remember, what are the repercussions of something like this happening? When we're starting to further other women, how can we be allies to support them? Because this is not about religion, right? This is about the right to live and the right to just be able to be who we are and all of who we are, and that includes, what we wear. So, if nothing else, I mean, please, if you see a Muslim woman and you have the opportunity, particularly in Quebec, to show your solidarity and support, then do that, because we all are women at the end of the day.
It raises a really interesting point, because one thing that has really stuck with me, it was on CBC The Current, and they were speaking to several women, Muslim women, about this issue. And one of the women said, there's really only about 12 women in all of Quebec that wear the full face covering, or wear the niqab, I think they said. So, this kind of legislation for 12 people, and I should back up and say that they're saying it's not about Muslim women. So I should back that up. And they're talking about sunglasses and scarves as well. But it's really, it raises the question, what are we focusing on right now?
Well, this is it, right? This is about divisive politics. This is just about winning the next election. This is not about people and the impact that it has. I mean, look at the whole issue in 2015 around the niqab and the citizenship ceremony. There were like 600 people who had been sworn in, and there was 2 women that this legislation was supposed to be about. Like, this is, this is truly just a game of politics.
Right. So, and that, that leads to, it's time to get angry about this kind of stuff, right? And I mean, I love the passion that you speak with on this issue, because it, it's about freedom of choice, and as feminists and as women, we deserve to have those kind of choices. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Western Canada, Eastern Canada, Atlantic Canada. All of us have to continue to fight for our choice, and our choice is really about anything, whether it's our clothing. It's about the decisions that we make, and this is affecting that.
Absolutely.
Final thoughts, Farheen?
Just that, we, as women, we need to stand together. And, I hope that the women across the country, hopefully my thoughts have supported you in understanding truly what this issue is about. And I hope that, when we start to see the denial of service, that we all come out together and start to advocate against it. Thank you. I really appreciate chatting with you. Yeah, thanks so much. And hopefully I'll see you in the next election. We'll see. Thanks so much. Thanks to our guest, Farheen Khan. And thanks to everyone that's tuned in to listen today. Your comments are always welcomed and encouraged. Our mission across Canada is to stand together in solidarity with our partners and children for the protection of our rights, our safety, our health, and our families, recognizing that our vibrant and diverse communities are the strength of our country. This is the Women's March Canada podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Women's March CDA and on our website at womensmarchcanada.com. I'm Melissa Durrell. Have a great day.